Disruptors and curious minds, welcome to another episode of Thinking on Paper. My name is Jeremy Gilbertson. I'm joined with my esteemed co-host and a few special guests today. But first, Mark Fielding, how are you, sir, in the French Alps? What's happening?
I'm excellent as always. The French Alps is now quite slowless. It's been a great week for me on a writing front. I've done no snowboarding, lots of writing. One of the things that you're like this week, Jeremy, is I've been doing some ghost writing about virtual events, kind of virtual worlds, the metaverse, how these worlds are going to change marketing. And as you know, I'm a marketing expert. I know everything about marketing. But I've been writing, ghost writing from the perspective of other people, trying to articulate other people's arguments, writing from their viewpoint, but using my logic. It's been interesting.
I love writing from a change of perspective is super fun, and it puts you in there's a little bit of empathy that kind of spins up too, doesn't it? To understand the other side and try to get all surrounding perspectives in one topic, I think is great. We'll look forward to share some of that stuff. I want to see it.
It's probably an interesting question that we could ask Zack and Anthony, because when you agree with what they're saying, it's easy to write. When you don't agree with what you're trying to say, you don't write. And it kind of, I was thinking about like killing your darlings when you're creating characters. I mean, you have to create these characters that they can't all be you. You know, you have to disagree, you have to hate them, you have to dislike them. And so kind of writing from their viewpoint, I mean, I guess that's part of what makes good writers. But how about you, Jeremy? How's your week been?
It's been a good one. It's been a good one. I've done a lot of free form writing lately. I've had a lot of things that I want to, and we get into this a lot, but using writing as a tool for processing what the heck is going on with yourself, but with your work and with all of that stuff. So I've had these really cool ideas just kind of swirling around with a few things that I'm building in kind of the tech world, just trying to sense make. Writing is sense making too. So it's been good for me. Nothing specific to report on, but the pencil is moving from left to right on the page, my friend.
Good.
All right. So tell us who we have here, Mark. Give us a little background. Let's introduce our friends here.
Yeah. So new ground for us as well. Two guests. So as some of our viewers might know, I've been writing about Film3 for a while now. And every time I research a project, every time I go on Twitter, Zack's name comes up. The Hidden Ones project comes up. It's always mentioned. The community on Twitter always voices their support. So I thought that they'd be great to have on the podcast. Zack is, well, I'll let them introduce themselves, but Zack is a creative director. He's the leader of the Hidden Ones project. Anthony is the creative director. He does business development, I think, on Hidden Ones. I'll let them introduce themselves, though.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry, I forgot to add something. So what particularly intrigued me was that Zack and Anthony in the Hidden Ones project are responsible for the first ever movie as an NFT. And that is something I think that we should dig into.
Good place to start. Well, Zack, why don't we throw it over to you first and as an intro, and then we'll pass it to Anthony.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on, guys. I always love going on podcasts and meeting new people and talking shop. So I'm Zack. Me and Anthony are more like co-founders of Hidden Ones. I mean, we've been working on this project for 2 years, more if you count the feature film that kind of sprung it off, which is the one you referenced. I'm a film director. I've got a background in software product design as well, so I'm kind of marrying those two with Hidden Ones. We just really love trying to figure out new ways to use Web3 for the benefit of filmmakers and creators with this project. So I'll kick it over to Anthony.
Yeah. And my background's in producing and making media and getting that stuff off the ground. And it's been a labor of love for a really long time. And I feel like recently with Hidden Ones, we're starting to get a lot of traction, which is really exciting.
So I always like to go back to kind of initial spark or catalyst for all of this stuff. So obviously you guys have been doing film work prior to this whole Web3 thing. What was the initial wait a minute, I might want to read a little bit more about this Web3 tech, this thing. Tell me about that catalyst first, and then we'll dive in from there.
Anthony, you're really good at telling this story.
So sure. Oh God. All right. So Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people in the beginning of 2021, the end of 2020, were starting to see what was being talked about online. There's a lot of this Web3 stuff, and it was like, what's going on? What's an NFT? What is all this? Oh, crypto. That's exciting. So one of the things that we deal with in our universe here at Hidden Ones are cryptids, and so those are things like Sasquatch or Bigfoot, Yeti, Mothman, and those are known as cryptids. And so honestly, it's super stupid, but it's just as simple as the wordplay of like crypto, cryptid. There's like there being some sort of alignment there, and it goes back to even when we were talking about producing the movie back in 2018, and eventually we made the movie in 2019. But when we were in those pre-production talks, we were like, maybe there's like a cool way we could like take in cryptocurrency or something as we distribute the film, because there's just this kind of sweet wordplay to the whole thing. So it's really not complicated. I wish it was a lot more sexy than just that, but that's what it is.
So it started as a kind of traditional filmmaking project. There was no blockchain Web3 at the genesis of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really specifically what brought us to NFTs in particular with this film was that we were kind of out of options for distribution. It's a small, low budget film, completely, self-financed out of our own pockets. And, we played a couple of festivals. We won one award. We were in talks with some distributors and sales agents, but, it didn't, none of the deals seemed really overtly beneficial to us. So that was at the exact moment where the NFT space was kind of exploding with the Beeple sale and everything. So we kind of returned to that little piece of wordplay, and we're like, what if like there's no one doing film for NFTs that we knew of. Jordan Bain was around at the same time on Clubhouse, founding the Film3 squad. But we were like, there has to be something that we could do here. So that was kind of the impetus of releasing the movie as an NFT in the first place, because we were kind of out of options as independent filmmakers. Yeah, so we got nothing to lose.
Yeah. So the first project ended up being this kind of one of one. Someone buys the film outright, and talk to me about I know you have an ongoing relationship actually, and it's an anonymous it's an anonymous relationship, right? But there's still some back and forth between you guys moving to the next project. So what was the one of one, like what were the ownership parameters? Is it full IP ownership that this particular individual has of the film now, or tell me about that?
Yeah, so what we kind of think of the NFT as is the film as fine art. So we've got this beautifully crafted one of one physical edition that's connected to the token, and it's got like a RFID chip in it. So like it's really like as deep as it can be in its relationship to the NFT itself. So being that the collector is anonymous, they still haven't claimed it. I could even bust it out to my closet right there. But yeah, I mean, in terms of this NFT as like a distribution mechanism, there's no IP rights given to the collector. It's like when you buy a painting, it's like you don't own the reproduction rights to that painting. The artist still, it keeps those, but you own it as a piece of fine art. So what we're hoping is that the more we're able to disseminate this film out into the world, and make it hopefully a meme, something resembling like a cult classic, that increases the resale value potentially of the one of one NFT itself.
Got it. And this cryptid thing. So I'm kind of a rookie. I know Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Mothman, but I didn't know that there was a category that all of these beings kind of lived in. So how did you guys get like excited about that particular niche of storytelling?
Wow. Yeah, it's funny. I think both Zack and I have an affinity for folklore. And I think that there's something about cryptids that are sort of a contemporary of that. So, it covers the gambit of everything from like close encounters with aliens to, being in the forest and trying to take a picture of Sasquatch. And I think it's just about mystery, right? Like I think at the core of it, these are just manifestations of mystery that pull you in and get you to appreciate kind of the greater mysteries of life. And I think that from a storytelling perspective, they're really great figureheads to explore because, like for example, in our feature film, The Hidden, He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes, our central figure is the Hidden Man, and this is Zack's proprietary cryptid, which is this suburban sort of trash cryptid who lives in the forest just outside this town. And there's so many questions as to who the Hidden Man really is, and the story is told from a village voice perspective, in the same way that like we all sort of engage with these conversations of like, is Bigfoot real and all those kinds of things. It's really more about the community aspect of it and people coming together and the phenomenon of what happens when people engage in a collective mystery. So like I have a proprietary cryptid too. It's called the Vampire Fern, right? And it's like you can't take a picture of it physically because when you do, it disappears on every image. You can't take a video of it because it's not there. But when you're with it in person, you can see it, you can feel it, you can touch it, but for some reason media isn't allowed to sort of like engage with it. And it's like, oh, what does that mystery mean to this like world that we live in? So we like to play in that field, and like we like to just ask the question and hopefully get some interesting answers out of it.
The Vampire Fern thing's interesting too, from just a presence perspective, right? We're all tied to devices, and we're like we're trying to document our days and make them really interesting. And it's like, well, hey, this thing you can't really see unless you're there with it, which is
right.
That's interesting social commentary, I think.
Yeah, well, and also like the community. Think about it this way too. It's like the community still exists around it. It doesn't need to be a thing you can see. I think that that's an important like factor too when you're talking about cryptids. It's like, it's like I said before, it really is just about people coming together. And I think that it's ended up being kind of an interesting metaphor for all this Web3 stuff in some ways too. There's a lot of like, well, does it have any value? Does it mean anything? And it's like, well, a bunch of people come together and participate in the meaning of it. I think that's the thing that makes the meaning.
Yeah, it's a very. I grew up. I was a big fan of the X-Files in my teens, and I've watched the Vampire, the Ferns, and I watched the trailer to Hidden Lake, and I don't know if I'm right, but there's a lot of references to cult classics. There's a lot of references to older movies, and so you're obviously fans of the genre. And I wonder, because Web3 is pretty niche, and cryptids and mystery, and that's niche as well. So you're kind of operating niche within niche, like a Russian doll of niche. And I guess that plays into your favor with the community, because the people who are interested in Hidden Ones are real fans and they're really passionate about it. But then on the other hand, obviously it's a very small amount of people who might be interested in it. Like how do you, I mean, people often talk about community in Web3 and the NFT community. How do you juggle those two kind of, not extremes, but those two counterback weights? How do you think about it?
That's a really good question. And it's on the nose, I mean, that's really kind of, our secret sauce, our secret weapon, right? Because we've struggled a lot in the past with building community and getting people even interested in the project in the first place. Because we're artists, we're producers. We're not necessarily community folks, although we've done a lot of skill set learning. We've gotten a lot of help with that, especially this year, to really kind of kick things into gear. But I think when we're thinking about like intellectual property and the where things are going, I think that this niche isn't really something that's been done quite at the level that we're doing it outside of like X-Files or Twin Peaks or Stranger Things, these kinds of things that we're referencing. Like the cryptid thing hasn't really been done in almost like a mainstream capacity specifically. So that's kind of like our far off target. That's our like stretch goal, is to be the brand for cryptids and really like bring this concept that is niche and not a lot of people think of, but everyone knows about Bigfoot, right? So it's a CCO, public domain property. No one owns Bigfoot, no one owns Mothman, and they have this sort of character recognition. So I think it's our job to sort of cinch them all up under a banner and make them, like you know how Disney has sort of owned like Aladdin and Pocahontas and all these public domain stories. That's kind of our goal with it, is to kind of bring the niche into an expanded audience. And how we do that is drilling into the niche of it, and just creating a space for people who love this kind of stuff to be engaged with it, and just, you know, tell the stories they want to tell within it, and you know, participate in the community.
Makes
Awesome
sense.
answer.
Yeah. So you guys were early builders in this world, obviously. You know that, you know, as Mark said, that you guys were the first NFT film that kind of came out. So I'm curious, over the last few years, as you watched the space evolve, as you did your initial test, because everything about this, to me, this community and emerging tech in general, is about test, iteration, expand, test, iteration, pivot, like the whole 9 yards. So what have you guys learned from the first test, and what are you taking into the next iteration of this?
Wow. Where do we begin? I think.
But yeah, if we just reference back just before this call, like Anthony and Zach were saying, that their journey is one of failure, but obviously you learn from failure. The more failures you have, the more you learn.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, it's funny because we've written so many metas in this, like, you know, NFT space, like, oh, the 10K collectible, you got to get your 10K collectible in the world. And we're like, okay, cool, so let's do that. And then we did, and then, you know, originally we had it for sale, and it just, like, you know, it didn't do well. It didn't sell out at all. And we were like, man, like, what happened? We like made really cool art, like what's going on? And we had to really look at ourselves and be like, oh, you know, we've been really like self-minded and ego-driven, and I think there was so much hype, you know, this original meta of NFTs as being these sort of like things that could rescue you in some way and save you from the like the you know, the shadowy depths of capitalism somehow.
Yeah.
It was really exciting that, like, oh yeah, we could pop off and make a bunch of money, and then you go use that and fund the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And then being confronted that we weren't going to be one of these, you know, epiphany projects, you know, like we, you know, I kind of joke, I have this phrase called like the epiphany complex, of just like being there and like waiting and believing that, like, you know, it's something great is going to happen, even though, you know, maybe you aren't actually doing the proper business things and building the proper machinery and framework to, you know, build a sustainable life. And so that we fell hard on our faces in that regard. But then we realized that, oh, well, now we still have this amazing asset. You know, we have this 10K collection still. We have our feature film. We have, you know, Zack and I are both really, like, we both really like to make things. And so we use Hidden Ones as an umbrella to put out stuff that we love to make. And now we've invited community into that process as well. And our 10K, when we decided to make it a free mint, and it was like, oh yeah, like 4 hours later, it was like completely like minted out, and was like, okay, cool. So that worked. What is this really all about? It's like, oh, you know, this is really about building community and being more sort of outwardly focused, and really trying to solve a problem for other people, and a problem that is relevant to us, and trying to do that inner work of like, well, if we're a business, what are we actually serving here? What are we actually trying to do to help other people? And what problems are we genuinely trying to solve? And for us now, you know, it's got us to this place where we're a growing team. We're taking on more advisors. We're having really, you know, high level conversations about scaling the project, because we really feel like we finally figured out the equation and the actual business model around this stuff. And that's really what the thing, that was really the thing that all of these little failures really taught us, is like, oh, what variables do we need in that equation, and how do they fit together? And one of the really exciting things now, and I, you know, I can put it just as simply as this, is that like Hidden Ones is trying to build a platform where creators can find their fandoms and vice versa. It's just as simple as that. It's just a hub now where if you're into, you know, cryptids and high strange storytelling, if you love X-Files, Twin Peaks, things like Stranger Things, this is where you will come to engage that work. You know, we're building the distribution network, and that's really what it's about. And we're trying to solve that problem for creatives who don't have that, and they want a way to license maybe the brand so they can get access to that entire distribution chain instead of it being instead of it being gated by like Hollywood. It's like, here's your access point.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it's actually starting to spark some questions in the chat. So Sean, thanks for your comment and your question. This is probably a good segue for, you know, how this is evolving into this guild structure, DAO structure. So maybe we could start with what is the and here we're gonna have the bell sound here, Mark, but the bi-directional value exchange, right? So what's happening between you and your audience that was once traditionally broadcast, but is now coming from both sides, right? So maybe let's talk about that a little bit. I think that's where Sean's question was headed.
Yeah, so I mean, what that is for us is the free exchange of IP in a decentralized and permissionless manner. So the impetus behind Hidden Ones as sort of a creative platform and distribution network, like Anthony is talking about, is that we took a look at all of this content that we've made and continue to make to this day and into the future. And we say there's so much intellectual property here. There's so much potentially beloved characters and takes on existing characters like Bigfoot, Mothman, and things like this. And the more that we work as a business to imbue value into that intellectual property and imbue an audience into it, the more valuable it then becomes for other filmmakers, other creators, writers, artists to want to use that IP and tap into the audience that's been built in there. And you see it happen all the time with IPs like Star Wars, where people create fan art, they do fan films to try to elevate their creative process. And the way it works right now is Disney, if you start making money from it, or if that's even your ambition in the first place, they'll hit you with a takedown notice, and they say, no, we need to protect our brand, and you know, this is unsanctioned. For us, it's a matter of saying, oh, you made this awesome thing, let's help you distribute it, let's help you get it to its audience, and in exchange, we'll take any new IP that you've created, we can then create with that, and so can the rest of the community. So the end goal here is not only supplying the intellectual property, audience, and distribution tools under the Hidden Ones brand for creators, it's also creating this sort of decentralized story world. Because again, I feel like Cryptids and this subject matter in particular are uniquely positioned to find success in that, because you know, they're decentralized myths already, and for us, the brand doesn't need to be protected in quite a way where, you know, Luke Skywalker needs to behave in this particular way. There could be multiple takes on Bigfoot or Mothman or any of these characters, and it could still be a cohesive brand. It's almost like we're the publisher and also the distributor and also the intellectual property. So that's kind of where our conception of Hidden Ones as an IP as a platform, is the buzzword we're calling it, comes from.
Got it.
Nice.
Got it. So one follow-up question. So you guys mentioned the early pivot. So we were doing the, you know, following along with the market. You did the one of one, 10,000 PFPs, push it out there. It didn't really land. Then you made the pivot and said, hey, we want to build a community. The best way to build a community is make this free to mint. If you're excited about this niche of like storytelling and cryptids and all of that, come on in and hang out. So, all right, let's talk about the moment after you saw 10,000 people come into your community that were excited about that. How do you keep them excited?
Content.
Yeah. You said
Story.
We have like an insane amount, like Anthony touched on this, but we're just like always producing. We're right now we have a free mint going on that's an open edition, and it's a podcast. It's a collectible podcast. Mm-hmm. And AI has really supercharged our ability to, you know, blow this out of the water in terms of our capacity to produce content too. I mean, we've got an AI illustrated comic book coming out that I put together in like a month. It's just crazy. And then, you know, the other side.
AI is not being podcast hosts, is it yet? Can't do that, can it? It's not presenting the podcast.
We've got Mark. We've got like a 2-month runway before we're done.
Yeah. enjoy it. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
One follow-up question. This might be a cool segue too. So thanks for the answer to that one question. It's all about story, and people are excited about this story that can evolve, and people can take the IP, create new storylines, create some new piece of IP. And I saw the whole sub-licensing thing, which I think is interesting, meaning if I understand this correctly, I grab a piece of the IP, I'm part of the community, and I create a story, and Mark sees my story and he's like, wow, that's really cool. I could take that story and make my own story. So a piece of it stays with me, a piece of it stays with Mark, and the new creation, a piece of it goes back to the DAO, right? Is that kind of how the financial piece? Because I think Jenny in the chat had some information on how does the money flow back to the creators?
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much got the nail on the head there. And the thing is, with let's say that you create a completely new character, new story, what have you. Your ability to license that out to everyone else in the community through Hidden Ones is completely opt-in, and it's completely on your terms. So we're not forcing anyone to make their creation a canonized Hidden Ones creation, which is what we call it when you sub-license through the brand. And the value prop for that is you'll collect a royalty passively on any money that people make from a creation that uses your creation, if that makes sense. So if you happen to create the next Mickey Mouse or the Hidden Ones Mickey Mouse, whatever, and you're allowing other people to sub-license it as a part of the Hidden Ones brand, you could have 10 different, feature films or graphic novels or whatever, all out there, all making money, perhaps even produced by studios. And each one of those is, you're getting a cut of that completely passively. And your own ability to create with your intellectual property, because you still own it, is unchanged. So, what we've hoped to build here is kind of an engine for discovery of these new myths, and an engine for everyone in the storytelling network to be bought into each person's success.
Yeah, and I mean, if we put our like studio exec hat on as well, it's a development pipeline, right? Like if certain ideas now are starting to take place in the universe, and the treasury fund is a big part of our model. It's like, great, we love that idea, let's hone in on it a little bit more, let's amplify it. The community loves this. So what would it be like if we took the comic book that the community loves and we actually turned that into a television series? Like the idea now that like the community is also a part of the studio infrastructure. Like we look a lot at the model of like, some of the biggest Twitch streamers right now, or the biggest YouTubers, and these like content creator models where they have these really, really engaged relationships with their community. I follow a lot of people on Twitch myself, and put them up in the corner of my computer screen, and it feels like I don't need to talk to them, but it's nice. I'm like hanging out, I have like a little social thing going on, whatever.
It's like a comfort blanket, a Twitch comfort blanket almost.
Yeah, exactly. And like one of the things that we want with Hidden Ones is to have some Twitch streamers that are a part of our universe, that are like here to like, be a part of the community, and to have them genuinely want to participate in what we're doing with Hidden Ones. And like in our sort of broad scope view of the metaverse, right? Hidden Ones is this home for this supernatural sort of storytelling, right? We want other people and other like, creators to go out and build out their own infrastructure, so I can go to their place and engage with, let's say like, more traditional indie like narrative storytelling, and be like, cool, this is like the framework for that. And now I can go there and do that. Like the whole idea, I think, with Web3 is empowering the individual to take their stuff and own all of it, and then go with it wherever they want to go. And I think that's the concept of what the metaverse, to me, really, really is about. It's like, oh, all these hubs are being created now. I can enter this building and have access to everything, and I can take that with me and go elsewhere with it, as opposed to all of it being owned by a singular entity. So we're prepping for a future that is driven by that mentality. And also with AI, like Zack, talks a lot about this, where there's going to be a need for some sort of curatorial entities that are like helping you kind of like engage with your AI entertainment experience. Like if you're really in the future, and however far away this is, going to be able to type in a prompt and see whatever you want to see in whatever form that ends up taking. And maybe it's, a bit uncanny valley, but like if you're still able to do that and engage in that form of entertainment, like where can you go to trust that those experiences are actually going to be worthwhile? And so we're factoring that into what we're building as well. And, he spoke to some of this AI element as well. And that's a huge part of what we're thinking. So yeah, we're just trying to do as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things too, for me, at least in the things that I hear from our community, that Thinking on Paper community, is, there things resonate from a philosophical perspective. Like, here's what we're trying to do. We're opening up storytelling. We're having community feed in. We're having these secondary spinoffs, these sub licenses, like. But they also get really excited about when there's like, oh, here's a tangible piece of that. And I know you guys are just moving into this, but have you guys had any crowdsourced stories that have come in that are super exciting? And a follow-up, have you had any sub-license of those crowd stories start to happen yet?
We're getting into this right now. And actually just this year, we did this community initiative, which is a lore contest. And the parameters were make a brief Hidden Ones myth, use AI to illustrate it optionally, or draw your own version of it. And then at the end of it, all of the stories that you write will become Hidden Ones canon. So we had 20 new stories that are Hidden Ones myths, all created by the community. And there's some incredible storytelling in there and incredible art. I wish I could bring up like examples of what people created, because they're so crazy. They're just the originality and the passion that you can feel from these creators. And a big thing that we noticed coming out of it was that people are thankful to have this kind of platform and to feel like they're not storytelling in a vacuum. They're doing it under the shared brand that gets stronger the more you use it and the more you tell stories under it. People are so thankful to have this sort of creative outlet that we're, even in these early stages, already supplying to them. And we took it up to a community vote at the end of it when we had all these new stories. And we said, okay, the top voted entry will get developed into a new Hidden One short film. And the top 5 entries will be episodes in our podcast that we just dropped the previous episode yesterday. So this speaks to the development pipeline aspect of it that Anthony was talking about, where we're taking all these community created stories. We're taking the data points as far as which stories resonate the most, and then we're taking those stories and expanding them into new IP alongside the creators. And all of this isn't quite fitting into the infrastructure that we've laid out quite yet, just because we haven't launched the DAO infrastructure yet. But the community, and especially the winning stories, those creators are tapped into like what we want to do. And there's already been some interest as far as folks wanting to sub-license out their stories under Hidden Ones. So it's been a resounding success already, like pre-launch even of any of this infrastructure.
I love the idea. And one of the things as a creator myself, like I write fan fiction, and because I like doing it, I don't want money. I don't do it for the money. I mean, one of the questions, like, how do creators make money? And obviously that's an incredibly valid question, but that's not the only question. And if you're designing, creating, building something where I can just go and write bollocks about Sasquatch because like that's fun and it's creative, and my payment is my creativity in a way. And I know that's a bit cheesy, but that is powerful. I mean, if you look at, I don't want to just talk about AI all the time, but it appears that we can't escape it. All of the AI imagery that we don't see it because people are just doing it because it's fun, because it's creative, because they like it, because they're experimenting. And I think that kind of giving people a community and the spark, I mean, I guess you're giving a lot of people, creative people or non-creative people, the spark to create something, which is powerful reward in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when we realized that that's really what it was about. Then it changed everything. You know, the second we were like, how can we just make this more fun for people? Like, we have a Mid-Journey bot in our Discord, so people can go in and do commute. Like, you can see in real time what people are trying to make. We'll go in there and do our creations. You know, we do a lot of, you know, we're very active on Twitter. Follow us at Hidden Mythos. That's our handle. That's a great way to engage with us. We're open to any and all DMs you have to throw our way. We're really here to engage the community, and we just want to try to find ways to make it more fun. Like, we were talking about a new idea like yesterday, and I was looking at, you know, I won't get into the weeds here, but I was looking at pixel art, and I'm like, this would be great. Like, what if we, like, you know, threw something like this at the community somehow? Like, there's just so many different layers of like engagement that you can do and introduce like fun for people, and then to throw like rewards at the end of that are involved in this sort of the model for us, which is like our role right now and the way that we see it moving forward is to amplify what's in here. Like, yes, you know, we're obviously creators, we're making our own things, but like it's a lot more exciting when we can identify something that is like truly amazing and be like, let's get this thing off the ground. Like, what can we do to support this? And then we can show people like, hey, look what we're able to do, like, in this community. Look what we're able to provide. Look what service we're able to provide people. And then hopefully, you know, like, as we're talking with investors, be like, hey, we figured out the equation. We're here to scale now. Like, what can we do to like bring this to more and more people?
Awesome. Tell me about Storyblocks. I was reading a little bit about that in your white paper. I guess the way I ingested it was like, it's like almost like a story starter kit in a way to keep this little through line, right? Because all of these things that come in, how do you manage? There's like 9 questions in this. Let's start with the Storyblocks first, and I'll expand on it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the impetus of that is just having like guidelines as far as like what is and what isn't a Hidden Ones creation, and we want those to be as broad as we possibly can, while still maintaining some cohesiveness for the Hidden Ones banner, because especially so early on as we are in this business, it's important to like carve out a moat in our brand. You know, it's important for audiences, general audiences, not even folks who are, you know, looking to create with us. It's important for them to know, like, okay, this is the Hidden Ones brand. This is what I'm getting into when I'm engaging with a piece of their content, regardless if it was made by us or if it was made by the community. So that's kind of the impetus behind having this sort of story stack, like almost you would with a development stack if you're building a software product. It's to provide some guidelines and some goalposts. And really what we took it from was kind of like the feature film that we made and Anthony's short film. Both of those are proprietary cryptids that we made ourselves, and there's some overlap in terms of the thematic storytelling concepts. And you know, that was you know, kind of an obvious play for us. It's like, what is Hidden Ones? What is a Hidden Ones story? We already have a couple. Let's see what the through lines between those two are, and then set those out for the community to sort of use as a guide.
That's amazing. What was the one most apparent one that came out to you guys when you were building this matrix, so to speak?
I mean, outside of cryptids,
yeah, outside of it needs to be a cryptid, but like what's the next one down?
I would say, I don't know, maybe Anthony, you differ, and we could talk about that, but I would say it's like, it's a sense of mystery. And secondarily, like that sense of communal storytelling within the myths themselves. But for me, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt there, but just to add on to that. So the whole of this conversation, I've been thinking about obviously what you're saying, but also fairy tales. And like I'm very interested in fairy tales, and I know they're not cryptids, but I wonder if that they're connected. It's that myth, it's a storytelling, it's communal storytelling. It's kind of passing on a different story perhaps to what the myths are passing on. I'm not sure, but does it fit into that, to Hidden Ones at all, or into that?
Let's just take Little Red Riding Hood, right? You have a talking wolf in that story. I don't think much more needs to be said. There's a Hidden Ones version of that story, right? Like,
smells like a cryptid. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So Little Red Riding Hood is a cryptid, or the wolf is a cryptid.
I think there's a take, right? Like, I think when you become familiar with the Hidden Ones world, there's a way to take that story, right? A decentralized public domain story, the same way that Disney has its own version of Snow White, for example, or whatever. Like, there's a Little Red Riding Hood version where, there's a little bit more of like a sort of high strange vibe to what's going on there. So like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the role of fairy tales, right? And if you look at myths, and there's a reason why people still put up the great Greek writers in their plays. It's like, we want to revisit this in the modern day. Like, yes, it's the same source material, but the reason we're doing it again is because we want to have a better sense of today. And it's like, that's exactly the role that I think folklore and fairy tales like play, which is another thing that it's sort of like a subdomain really of what we're talking about, I think. Fairy
tales do my teaching for me to my kids. They're like they're my morals. They're the morals. They're the way to think. That's what I use. Okay.
That's what they're there for, man.
Yeah.
Well, they're all tied. We talk about this a lot in previous episodes, guys, but like just the archetypes and story framework that resonates with our biology and our psychology, the voyage and return, the rebirth, comedy, tragedy, hero's journey stuff. These are all like well-documented beats on journeys that resonate with our psychology, right? So, I mean, fairy tales are written just for that. Hey, I need to tell my kid this thing. What's the pattern in the beat that will resonate most with it, right? There's a little bit of math in storytelling, which is bonkers to me. That's a whole sideline.
Well,
but
it's funny too, because you have like, Carl Jung, and basically like reverse engineered fairy tales to be like, this is psychology, I think is really,
100%. 100%.
What's your favorite fairy tale, Jeremy?
My favorite fairy tale. Wow, that's a great question. Man,
I have to think about it. I
haven't tapped into one lately, but I'll let you know when it pops up. But hey, guys, did you have a thread you were going to go down, Mark? Fire
yeah, I did. And sorry, and I think we have Tom Gillespie in the chat here today, his alter ego. And one of the common threads that I think that Zack and Anthony have both demonstrated, that all of our guests have demonstrated to a certain degree about Web3, and I want to talk about Web3 panning out a little bit. So Zack is a filmmaker, and in the old world, he's a filmmaker, but in Web3, he's a filmmaker, and he's this, and he's this, and he's this, and he's this. And if you look at all of our guests, like we had a fashion designer who became like a music engineer, a marketing guru, and everyone seems to have multiple skill sets now, or learning multiple skill sets. And then that kind of links to the DAO structure and this collaborative project building, where obviously you can't be a filmmaker and like a marketing expert from the get-go. So you use your DAOs and your community to do that. And just panning out, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent about Web3. And I know that AI comes into this. So maybe AI is not going to take all our jobs, because we're all going to have lots of jobs, and it can't take all of our jobs, or it can help us with certain parts of our jobs. And I guess my question is, have you noticed that kind of adaptive skill set? You've had to learn new things and learn new skills, and how do you think about it? And am I right, Jeremy, to ask that question? Is that you're the deep philosophical one?
No, it's a good question. I'm curious on the answer.
Yeah, I think for us it's almost in reverse. I mean, Anthony and I are just like we're like puppy dogs, it's like we find something new, some kind of new, rabbit hole to go down. And it's like, that's why we're here in the first place. And then on top of that, on top of this, I mean, like I worked for like 10 years as a product designer in software for like HR and, healthcare and things like this, in addition to being a filmmaker. And, Anthony has a whole background as well. And then once we get into Web3, then that just explodes. And now we have to be a marketer, we have to be a community builder. We have to be founders. We're, raising investment now for this thing. There's a tech element to it that we have to understand. So it's, that's totally mirrors our experience.
Yeah, and in some ways too, it's like the hand has been forced, and so it's like I don't think originally we were like super stoked about Discord at all, and then it was like there was a moment in early February of this past year where Zach and I were looking at each other like, oh, this is actually awesome. Like this like makes everything possible. We have just been like we could have been thinking about it this way the entire time, and so that's part of it too. It's like this, like it's driven. There are aspects that are driven by necessity that then all of a sudden you turn around and be like, I was like kind of complaining this whole time. This is actually awesome. Like it's like, oh, what happened to just being a filmmaker? It's like, well, if I was just a filmmaker, I'd be sitting and waiting for people to give me opportunities in a lot of ways. And I think that being interested in sort of these new modalities and thinking about like what new distribution networks not only have been created, but will be a part of the future, and being, in the foam of the wave there, I think is something that excites us. So it's like, it's totally worth that sort of like, this is a drag sort of initial thing of like, why is the new world asking this of us? And then actually having it be something that is incredibly empowering, because now, the amount of times that like that people like ask Zach and I questions now about how any of this works, from like a high level, what is Web3 perspective, but also to like really minute sort of things of like, okay, like how do you, how are you going about like, everything that's in our white paper? What's the vision of actually tying all of this together and making this something that is really in service to a really deep pain point for so many people? I think we have this amazing, thriving film community called Film3 here in this space, and we have constant dialogue of how this whole machinery works. And it's been amazing to have these online salons where we can hop into a Twitter space. We can talk with you guys live, and people can listen in and actually like contribute something to the conversation on the side, or they can ask a question. And it's just like scaling up all this knowledge now. And it's like, I don't know. I feel really grateful that we get to be here doing this kind of stuff.
Well, I'm happy for you that you found your Discord aha moment. I'm still waiting for mine. And it's a delicate dance for me, but I know it has its purpose, and I know it's an amazing way to kind of catalyze a community and keep them active and identify community members who have what I call a high level of give a shit about something. And then those people can be folded into the team, and the team grows. I think it all makes sense, but sometimes it hurts my brain a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're trying to be a little mindful of time. We're a little bit over, but I wanted to throw out some kind of closing thoughts just from my side, and would love to go around the horn and hear what you guys have. But I think it's really interesting, the cryptid, the crowdsourced myth kind of thing. You're in a village and you hear a story, and the farmer's daughter on the far end tells the story, and then Jim, who runs the general store, has his perspective on the story, and then John, who cleans the mule yard, saw something completely different, right? And this goes back to Mark, what you were saying earlier. You're writing from different perspectives and having a whole more empathetic totality of what's happening. I see that as a very interesting through line to what you guys are building, because it's underneath this crowdsourced myth, and you guys are building a mechanic to capture and assign ownership and re-ownership to that. So it's really interesting. And I'm also super excited that you have that stories are coming in, that you have inbound stuff. I mean, the theory and all of the stuff you have set up is great, but now that you're starting to have this interaction, and we're gonna hopefully see some outputs in the near future of that interaction, you guys, it sounds like you're doing it, and it's super cool.
Yeah, I think that's a reflection of possibly the content material. Where I I put out a tweet earlier about kind of what makes you weird when you're young can make you very successful when you're old or older. And I don't know if I'm wrong about this, but the people who liked those myths, who liked Bigfoot, who liked Sasquatch, who liked UFOs, I know that's not in the canon, but that kind of fringe storytelling have gravitated towards NFT and Web3 because there's that fringe mentality, that kind of rebellion to the traditional norms of storytelling in this instance. And I think that lends itself very well, which is to the weirdos who are creating that in that canon. And my favorite fairy tale is Hansel and Gretel.
Mark, what if you're weird when you're old and not young? What if you never got unweird? Is there any benefit to that? I'm just looking personally.
Like, I guess it's better to be weird than not weird. So if you're weird now and you weren't when you were young, you've evolved.
I feel good about that. Zach, Anthony, closing thoughts. What are you thinking?
I'm happy to jump in. Jeremy, just speaking to that sort of village voice that you were talking about. Yeah, I mean, really what we're trying to do is sort of validate each and every one of those perspectives and saying, hey, you actually do have a story to tell and it's worth something. And we're really excited about the future and of storytelling in general. We're stoked that we get to be a part of whatever this next wave is. And I just have to say thank you for bringing us on, and the enthusiasm and the vibes are great. And I'd love to, keep talking with you guys and to be, catching up with what you guys are up to as well. So yeah, just really grateful and thankful. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, likewise. Nothing really to add there. We really appreciate it, guys. It's been great talking.
Very cool. Yeah, we enjoyed it. So Mark does a great job of preparing kind of episode notes and links and all that stuff. So we'll get those from you.
Yeah.
Share information on where to find you and connect with you. And yeah, you keep doing the work, guys. It sounds like it's doing its job, and you guys are offering people a great way to tell stories under a unified umbrella. So it's really cool.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
All right, take it easy. Thanks for listening, guys. Talk soon. See you next week.
See you guys
next week.